The medical bay of Orion Station was always busy. Ships came and went every day, bringing travelers from 100 different worlds. Dr. Velix had worked here for 15 years. She had treated broken bones, strange diseases, and wounds that would make most people sick just to look at. She thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The humans had arrived 3 weeks ago. They were new to the galactic community. Their planet, Earth, had only made first contact 5 years before. Most species in the Galactic Coalition were still learning about them. Velix had read the basic files. Humans were warm-blooded. They breathed oxygen. They came from a planet with 1 sun and 1 moon. Nothing special, she had thought. Just another species joining the stars. Then Private First Class Ethan Park was carried into her medical bay. 2 of his fellow soldiers brought him in. They were not panicking, which Velix found strange. The young human was coughing hard. His skin was pale and covered in sweat. His body temperature was far above normal. When Velix ran her scanner over him, she dropped it in shock. "Isolation protocols," she shouted. Her voice echoed through the medical bay. "Everyone move back. This human is infected." Her assistant, a thin and nervous Pelion named Oryx, rushed to her side. His crystal-like bones made a soft clicking sound as he moved. "What is it? What does he have?" Velix picked up her scanner with shaking hands. She read the results again, hoping she had made a mistake. She had not. There are hostile microorganisms in his body. Not 1 type. Not 2 types. 17 different types. She looked at the human soldiers who had brought their friend in. How is he still alive? One of the soldiers, a woman with short black hair named Grace Kim, looked confused. "What do you mean?" "He just has the flu. Maybe a cold too. He was working in the swamp moon for 3 days. The conditions were bad. Just the flu?" Velix felt her 4 eyes go wide. There are organisms inside him that are eating his cells. They are multiplying. By my count, there are billions of hostile bacteria in his lungs alone. And you say, just the flu? Grace shrugged. Yeah, it happens. He'll be fine in a week or so. Velix turned back to her patient. Ethan Park had stopped coughing for a moment. His eyes were open, but unfocused. He was clearly in pain. And yet, when he saw the fear on the alien doctor's face, he managed a weak smile. "Hey, Doc," he said. His voice was rough and tired. "Don't worry about me. I've had worse. One time I got food poisoning and the flu at the same time. That was a bad week." Velix did not know what food poisoning was, but she did not want to find out. She turned to Oryx. "We need to get him into the quarantine room now, and someone needs to scan the other humans. If this is spreading, it's not spreading to them," Grace said. She crossed her arms. "We've all had the flu before. Most of us have some immunity to it. And even if we didn't, we just get sick for a while and then get better." Get better? Velix could not believe what she was hearing. These pathogens are designed to kill. They invade cells. They multiply. They destroy tissue. How can you simply get better? Grace looked at the other human soldier, a tall man named David Lee. He looked just as confused as she did. "Is she serious?" David asked. "I think so," Grace said. She turned back to Velix. "Dr. Velix, I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding. Humans get sick all the time. Our bodies fight off infections. That's just how it works." Velix felt like she was losing her mind. She had studied medicine for 40 years. She knew how infections worked. When a pathogen entered a body, it attacked. It spread. It killed. That was why the Galactic Coalition had spent thousands of years developing medicines, sterile environments, and protective technology. Without these things, infection meant death. But this human was lying on her examination table. filled with enough hostile organisms to kill a dozen Pelions. And his friends were acting like it was nothing. "Put him in quarantine," Velix said quietly. "I need to study this." They moved Ethan Park to the isolation room. He fell asleep almost immediately. His body continued to fight the battle inside him, a battle Velix could only watch through her medical scanners. For the next 3 days, she did not sleep. She barely ate. She watched the human's body with a mix of horror and fascination. His temperature rose. This should have killed him. High temperatures destroyed cells and damaged organs. But the human's body seemed to be doing it on purpose. It was cooking the pathogens. It was using heat as a weapon. Then she saw the white blood cells dot in most species. White blood cells were simple defenders. They tried to block pathogens from spreading. They usually failed. But human white blood cells were different. They were hunters. Velix watched through her microscope as one of these cells found a bacterium, surrounded it, and swallowed it whole. It did not just block the invader. It ate it, and there were millions of these cells. An army of tiny soldiers flowing through the human's blood, searching for enemies and destroying them. "This is impossible," she whispered. Oryx stood beside her, watching the same images. His face was pale. "Dr. Velix, I'm reading something else. His body is producing some kind of protein. It's attaching to the pathogens." Velix looked at the data. The proteins were marking the bacteria, like a hunter marking prey. And once they were marked, the white blood cells attacked them faster and more accurately. "He's making targeted weapons," Velix said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "His body is creating custom weapons designed to destroy these specific invaders." On the 3rd day, Ethan Park woke up. His fever had broken. His cough was almost gone. He sat up in bed and asked for something called chicken soup. Velix stood in the doorway of his room staring at him. This human had been filled with deadly pathogens. His body had been a battlefield. And now he was asking for soup. "How do you feel?" She asked. Ethan stretched his arms and yawned. "Better. Still a little tired, but that's normal. The worst part is over." He looked at her and grinned. "Thanks for the room, Doc. The bed was pretty comfortable." Velix did not know what to say. She had just witnessed something that should not be possible. This human had fought a war inside his own body and won. Without medicine. Without technology. Just his own flesh and blood. She needed to tell someone about this. She needed to tell everyone. The galaxy had no idea what humans really were. Dr. Velix had not slept in 5 days. Her eyes were tired and her body was weak, but she could not stop working. The data on her screens was too important, too terrifying, too amazing. She had spent every hour studying human biology. She had requested files from Earth's medical databases. She had run hundreds of tests on blood samples that Ethan Park had kindly provided. And the more she learned, the more afraid she became. Lieutenant Grace Kim came to visit her on the 5th day. The human woman walked into the research lab and found Velix surrounded by holographic displays, empty food containers, and scattered notes. "Dr. Velix?" Grace said carefully. "Are you okay?" The nurses said, "You haven't left this room in days." Velix turned to look at her. Her 4 eyes were bloodshot and tired. "Lieutenant Kim, good. I need to talk to you. I need to talk to all humans, actually. But you will do for now." Grace raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." "It is serious. It is the most serious thing I have ever discovered in my entire medical career." Velix stood up from her chair and walked toward Grace. "Your people. Your bodies. They are not normal. They are not like any other species in the galaxy." Grace looked confused but stayed calm. "What do you mean?" "Your immune system." Velix said the words like they were the name of some ancient monster. "I have spent 5 days studying it. I thought I understood infection and disease. I thought I knew how bodies worked. I was wrong. I knew nothing. She pulled up a holographic display showing a diagram of the human body. Red dots appeared throughout the image, representing blood cells. Every species in the Galactic Coalition has some form of defense against disease, Velix explained. We have barriers. We have cells that try to slow down infections. But these defenses are weak. They buy us time until we can get medical treatment. Without medicine, even a small infection can kill most species within days. Grace nodded slowly. Okay, and humans are different? Humans are not just different. Humans are impossible. Velix zoomed in on the display, showing individual cells. Your body does not just defend against infection. It fights back. It kills. It kills. You have an army inside you, Lieutenant. A real army, with soldiers and weapons and strategy. She pointed to a large cell on the display. This is what you call a macrophage. Do you know what it does? It patrols your body, looking for anything that should not be there. When it finds a pathogen, it does not run away. It does not call for help. It attacks. It wraps itself around the invader and eats it alive. It digests the enemy inside itself. Grace looked at the image. Yeah, I learned about that in school. That's pretty basic stuff. Basic? Velix's voice cracked. This is not basic. This is terrifying. But it gets worse. Much worse. She changed the display to show smaller cells with a different shape. These are your lymphocytes. They are even more dangerous than the macrophages. These cells have memory, Lieutenant. When they encounter a pathogen, they study it. They learn its weaknesses. They develop specific weapons called antibodies that are designed to destroy that exact type of invader. Right, Grace said. That's how immunity works. You say that like it is normal. Velix grabbed Grace's arm, her fingers shaking. Do you understand what this means? Your body learns from every infection. Every disease that tries to kill you makes you stronger. If the same pathogen tries to attack you again, your body recognizes it immediately and destroys it before it can do any damage. Grace gently removed Velix's hand from her arm. Dr. Velix, I think you need to sit down. You're getting very excited. I am not excited. I am horrified. Velix walked back to her desk and pulled up more data. I found something else. Something that made me question everything I know about biology. The display showed a different type of cell. It was smaller than the others, with a rough surface. This is what you call a natural killer cell. Do you know why it has that name? Because it kills. That is its only purpose. It moves through your body, checking every cell it finds. And if it discovers a cell that is sick or damaged or infected or turning into cancer, it destroys it. Your own body kills your own cells to protect you. Grace shrugged. Better than letting cancer spread, right? Velix stared at her. You speak of cancer like it is a minor problem. Do you know that cancer is a death sentence for most species? Once cells start growing out of control, there is nothing we can do. But humans fight it from the inside. Your natural killer cells hunt down cancer before it can even begin. She sat down heavily in her chair. And then there is the fever response. When Private Park was sick, his body temperature rose to dangerous levels. I thought he was dying. But he was not dying. His body was raising its own temperature on purpose. It was cooking the pathogens alive while keeping his vital organs protected. He used heat as a weapon. Grace pulled up a chair and sat across from Velix. Dr. Velix, I can see this is really affecting you. But I don't understand why. This is just how human bodies work. We've been like this for millions of years. That is exactly what frightens me. Velix looked at the human woman with tired eyes. You evolve like this. Your planet was so dangerous, so filled with disease and infection, that your bodies had to become war machines just to survive. Every human alive today is the descendant of millions of years of biological warfare. She pulled up one more file. I found your historical records. I read about something called vaccination. Do you know what that is? Grace nodded. Of course. We inject weakened or dead pathogens into our bodies so our immune systems can learn to fight them without getting sick. You deliberately infect yourselves. Velix's voice was quiet. You take diseases, weaken them, and put them inside your bodies. On purpose. So that your immune systems can practice killing them. She shook her head slowly. Any other species would die from this. But humans use it to become stronger. Grace was quiet for a moment. I never really thought about it that way. There is more. I read about something called allergy shots. Humans who are allergic to things will inject small amounts of those things into their bodies, over and over, to teach their immune systems to stop overreacting. You train your own bodies. You discipline your immune systems like soldiers. Velix leaned forward. Lieutenant Kim, I have one question. One simple question that has been bothering me since I started this research. What is it? Why did no one warn us? Velix spread her arms wide. Why did no one tell the Galactic Coalition that humans are like this? We have been studying your species for 5 years. We have reports on your culture, your technology, your history. But no one mentioned that you carry armies inside your bodies. No one mentioned that you are natural-born survivors of biological warfare. Grace thought about it for a moment. Then she smiled. Honestly, I think it's because we assumed everyone was like this. We didn't know other species were different. Velix blinked. You thought everyone could fight off infections naturally? Yeah. Grace leaned back in her chair. When I first learned that Peliums could die from a common cold, I thought it was a joke. I couldn't believe it. How do you survive without an immune system? We use medicine, technology, sterile environments. But what if the medicine doesn't work? What if you're far from technology? What if you can't keep things sterile? Velix was quiet. She knew the answer. In those situations, they died. Grace stood up and put a hand on Velix's shoulder. Dr. Velix, I think you should get some rest. You've learned a lot in the past few days. It's a lot to take in. Velix nodded slowly. You are right. I need to sleep. But first, I need to send a report to the Galactic Medical Council. They need to know about this. Everyone needs to know. Grace walked toward the door, then stopped. Dr. Velix? One more thing. Yes? You asked why no one warned you about humans. Grace smiled again. Maybe the better question is, why did no one warn us about everyone else? She left the room, leaving Velix alone with her thoughts and her fear. The alarm rang through Orion Station at 3 in the morning. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Emergency announcements played in 12 different languages. Something terrible had happened. Dr. Velix ran to the command center as fast as her legs could carry her. When she arrived, she found Station Commander Thylix standing in front of a massive display screen. His gray skin had turned pale. His hands were shaking. What is happening? Velix asked. Thylix turned to look at her. His eyes were filled with fear. A cargo ship arrived 6 hours ago from the outer colonies. We just finished inspecting the cargo. We found something bad. Very bad. He pointed at the screen. It showed a microscopic image of a pathogen. Velix recognized it immediately. Her blood turned cold. Groxian plague, she whispered. Yes. Thylix's voice was barely audible. Somehow, contaminated materials were loaded onto that ship. The plague has already spread to the lower decks. We have 47 confirmed infections, and the number is growing. Velix felt her legs go weak. Groxian plague was one of the deadliest diseases in the galaxy. It attacked the nervous system and killed within days. The fatality rate was 94%. There was no cure. The only way to stop it was complete isolation and hoping enough people survived to maintain immunity. "How many people are on the lower decks?" she asked. "Over 2,000. Silex closed his eyes. "We've sealed the area. No one goes in or out. But we don't have enough medical supplies to treat that many patients. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough of anything." The next few hours were chaos. Medical teams worked around the clock to set up quarantine zones. Supplies were gathered from every corner of the station. But it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. Velix was in the medical bay, organizing supplies, when Corporal David Lee walked in. He was wearing his normal uniform. No protective suit. No mask. Nothing. "What can I do to help?" he asked. Velix stared at him. "Corporal, what are you doing?" "You need to get to the safe zones. This plague is spreading." David shook his head. "I know. That's why I'm here. You need people to deliver supplies to the quarantine areas, right? People who can go in and out without getting sick." "No one can go in and out without getting sick. That's the whole point of quarantine." David smiled. "No one except humans." Velix blinked. She had been so focused on the crisis that she had forgotten about her recent research. Humans and their impossible immune systems. Humans who fought off infections that would kill any other species. "You think you can survive Groxian plague?" she asked. "I don't just think it. I know it." David pulled out a small tablet and showed her a message. "Our medical officer ran some tests. Groxian plague attacks the nervous system using a specific protein. Humans don't have that protein. The disease literally cannot infect us. We're immune." Velix grabbed the tablet and read the data. It was true. The plague's mechanism of attack was useless against human biology. It was like trying to open a lock with the wrong key. "This is incredible," she said. "This is useful," David corrected. "Now, where do you need me?" Within hours, every human on Orion Station had volunteered for relief duty. There were only 37 of them, but they worked like 100. Sergeant Hannah Wright took charge of supply runs. She organized teams of humans to carry food, water, and medicine into the quarantine zones. She walked through corridors filled with sick and dying aliens, her face calm and determined. The plague swirled around her like invisible death, but it could not touch her. Private Ryan Cho volunteered for the worst job of all, body removal. When patients died, someone had to take them away. It was dangerous work for any other species. The dead were still contagious. But Ryan walked into the morgue areas without fear. He treated each body with respect, wrapping them carefully and carrying them to the cremation chambers. He did this work alone for 18 hours straight, until every fallen patient had been properly handled. Specialist Lily Tran became the unofficial nurse of the lower decks. Pelions were the most vulnerable to the plague. Their crystal bones made them fragile, and the disease attacked them faster than anyone else. Lily spent her days carrying sick Pelions to medical beds. They weighed almost nothing to her strong human arms. She held their hands when they were scared. She told them stories to help them forget their pain. Many of them survived because of her care, and Ethan Park, the young soldier who had started all of this with his simple flu, became the face of human kindness on the station. He had recovered completely from his earlier illness. Now he used his energy to help others. He took meals for patients who could eat. He cleaned rooms that were too dangerous for other species to enter. He smiled and joked and kept everyone's spirits up, even when things looked hopeless. Dr. Velix watched all of this with amazement. She had spent her whole life believing that infection was something to fear, something to hide from, something that always won in the end. But these humans walked through plague zones like they were walking through rain. The disease fell on them and slid off, unable to find a way inside. On the 5th day of the crisis, Station Commander Thylix called a meeting. The situation was still bad, but it was no longer getting worse. The quarantine was holding. Patients were receiving care. And the humans were making all the difference. "I don't know how to thank you," Thylix said to Grace Kim, who had become the unofficial leader of the human volunteers. "Your people have saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands." Grace shook her head. "We didn't do anything special. We just helped where we could. You walked through death zones without protection. You touched infected patients with your bare hands. You breathed contaminated air for days." Thylix's voice was filled with emotion. Any other species would have died 100 times over. But you treated it like it was nothing. "It was nothing to us," Grace said simply. "That's the point. We can't catch this disease. So we had a choice. We could hide in the safe zones and let people die, or we could help. We chose to help." Velix stepped forward. "Commander, if I may, I have been studying human biology for several days now. What the humans did here is not surprising to me anymore. Their bodies are designed for this. They have spent millions of years fighting diseases far worse than Groxian plague. This is simply what they do." Thylix looked at the human soldiers standing in his command center. They looked tired but satisfied. They had worked harder than anyone else during the crisis, and they had done it without complaint. "I owe you all a debt I can never repay," he said. David Lee grinned. "You could start by improving the food in the cafeteria. I've been eating emergency rations for a week. I'd kill for a real burger." The tension in the room broke. People laughed. Even Thylix managed a small smile. The crisis would continue for another 2 weeks. More people would get sick. Some would die. But the worst was over. The humans had turned the tide, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. When it was finally over, when the last patient had recovered and the quarantine zones were cleaned, Velix found Hannah Wright sitting alone on an observation deck. The sergeant was looking out at the stars, her face thoughtful. "May I join you?" Velix asked. Hannah nodded. "Sure." Velix sat down beside her. "I wanted to thank you personally. What you did during the crisis, what all of you did, it was remarkable." Hannah shrugged. "We just did what anyone would do." "No," Velix shook her head. "That is not true. Anyone else would have died. Only humans could have done what you did. Only humans have bodies strong enough to walk through plague and survive." Hannah was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft. "You know what the funny thing is? On Earth, we're not considered special. We get sick all the time. We catch colds and flu and stomach bugs. Kids get ear infections. Old people get pneumonia. We spend billions of dollars every year on medicine and hospitals and doctors." She turned to look at Velix. "We never thought of ourselves as survivors. We always thought of ourselves as fragile, always fighting to stay healthy, always worried about the next disease." Velix considered this. "Perhaps that is why you are so strong. You have never stopped fighting. You have never had the luxury of feeling safe." Hannah smiled sadly. "Maybe, or maybe we're just too stubborn to give up." She stood up and stretched. "I should get some sleep. First real rest I'll have had in weeks." She walked away, leaving Velix alone with the stars. The alien doctor sat there for a long time, thinking about humans and their strange, wonderful, terrifying bodies. Stubborn, she thought. Yes, that was a good word for them. The universe had tried to kill them for millions of years, and they had refused to die. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Medical Council was the largest room Dr. Velix had ever seen. It could hold 10,000 beings from hundreds of different species. Today, it held exactly that many. Every seat was filled. Every species was represented. And every eye, whether they had 2 or 4 or 12, was focused on the small stage at the center of the room. Velix stood on that stage, her notes trembling in her hands. She had never spoken to such a large audience before. She had never felt so nervous. But she had important information to share. Information that could change everything the galaxy knew about humanity. The council chairman, an ancient Grothian named Morax, raised one massive hand. The room fell silent. Dr. Velix of Orion Station, Morax said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. You have requested this emergency assembly to share findings about the human species. The council has granted your request. You may begin. Velix took a deep breath. Thank you, Chairman. Distinguished members of the council, I stand before you today because I have discovered something that I believe every species in our coalition must know. She pressed a button on her tablet. A holographic image appeared above her head, showing a diagram of a human body. For the past several weeks, I have been studying human biology. I began this research after treating a human patient who was infected with multiple pathogens simultaneously. I expected him to die. Instead, he recovered completely within 7 days, without any medical treatment from my staff. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Velix continued. At first, I thought this was a mistake, a lucky accident. But as I studied more, I realized the truth. Human bodies are not like ours. They are not passive victims of disease. They are active warriors. She changed the image to show a close-up of blood cells. The human immune system is not simply a defense mechanism. It is a complete biological warfare network. It has soldiers, weapons, strategies, and memory. It fights infections in ways that no other known species can match. A delegate from the Pelian Confederation raised a thin arm. Dr. Velix, many species have immune responses. What makes humans so different? An excellent question. Velix zoomed in on a specific cell. Let me show you. This is what humans call a macrophage. When this cell finds a pathogen in the human body, it does not simply block it or slow it down. It attacks. It surrounds the invader and consumes it. It digests the pathogen inside itself, breaking it down completely. She showed a video recording of the process. The audience watched in silent horror as the macrophage engulfed a bacterium and destroyed it. But this is only the beginning, Velix said. The macrophage then takes pieces of the destroyed pathogen and shows them to other immune cells. It is sharing information, teaching, saying, this is what the enemy looks like. Learn to recognize it. She changed to a new image. These are lymphocytes. They are the most dangerous cells in the human body. When they learn about a pathogen, they begin producing antibodies. These antibodies are custom-designed weapons, created specifically to target that exact type of invader. A Grothian delegate leaned forward. Custom-designed? You mean they create new weapons for each disease? Yes, every time. Velix nodded. And here is the truly terrifying part. Once a human has fought off a disease, their lymphocytes remember it forever. They create memory cells that stay in the body for decades, sometimes for life. If the same pathogen ever returns, the human body recognizes it instantly and destroys it before symptoms even appear. The hall was completely silent now. Thousands of beings stared at the holographic displays, trying to understand what they were seeing. But there is more, Velix continued. Humans have cells called natural killers. These cells patrol the body constantly, checking every cell they find. If they discover a cell that is damaged, infected, or becoming cancerous, they destroy it immediately. Humans fight wars against their own cells to stay healthy. A small Talaxian ambassador stood up. This is frightening. You make humans sound like biological weapons. I understand your concern, Ambassador. But let me finish. Velix pulled up historical data from Earth. Humans did not choose to be this way. Their planet made them this way. Earth is a dangerous world. It is filled with bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi that have been trying to kill humans for millions of years. She showed images of Earth's history, plagues, epidemics, mass deaths. The Black Death killed 1/3 of Europe's population. The Spanish flu killed 50 million people worldwide. Smallpox, cholera, tuberculosis, malaria. Humans have faced disease after disease, generation after generation. And each time, the survivors passed their stronger immune systems to their children. Velix spread her arms wide. What you see in humans today is the result of millions of years of natural selection. Every human alive is descended from ancestors who survived plagues that killed everyone around them. They are the ultimate survivors of biological warfare. She showed one final image. It was a medical syringe. And then humans did something that no other species has ever done. They took control of their own evolution. They created vaccination. Vaccination? The Grothian chairman looked confused. What is that? Humans discovered that if they injected weakened or dead pathogens into their bodies, their immune systems would learn to fight them without actually getting sick. They deliberately infected themselves with controlled diseases to make themselves immune to real ones. The audience erupted. Delegates shouted questions. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Some looked amazed. Velix waited for the noise to quiet down. I know this is difficult to accept. When I first learned about vaccination, I could not believe it either. But it is true. Humans have been doing this for hundreds of years. They have eliminated some diseases entirely through this method. Smallpox, which once killed millions, no longer exists because humans vaccinated themselves against it. The Talaxian ambassador spoke again. Dr. Velix, I must ask the question that everyone is thinking. If humans are this powerful, if their bodies are this dangerous, why should we trust them? What happens if they decide to use their biological advantages against us? Velix smiled. It was the question she had been waiting for. Ambassador, during the Groxian plague crisis on Orion Station, humans had every opportunity to protect only themselves. The plague could not hurt them. They could have stayed in the safe zones and watched the rest of us die. But they did not do that. Instead, they risked their lives to save ours. They walked through plague zones to bring us food and medicine. They carried our sick to medical beds. They held our hands when we were dying. She pulled up images from the crisis. Hannah Wright carrying supplies. Ryan Cho removing bodies. Lily Tran comforting sick Pellians. Ethan Park cooking meals for patients. Humans are not our enemies. They are our greatest allies. Their bodies may be designed for war, but their hearts are designed for kindness. They could have let us die, but they chose to save us. That is who they really are. The hall was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not fear, not anger. Something closer to respect. Chairman Morax stood up slowly. Dr. Velix, you have given us much to think about. The Council will need time to discuss these findings. But I want to say one thing. He looked around the hall at all the different species gathered there. We have always thought of ourselves as advanced. We have technology that can cross galaxies. We have medicine that can cure almost any disease. We have built civilizations that span thousands of worlds. But we have always needed those technologies to survive. Without them, we are fragile. He turned to look at the holographic image of the human body, still floating above the stage. Humans have something we do not. They have strength inside themselves. They've been fighting for survival since before they could make tools or build cities. And they won. They won against enemies they could not even see. Morax nodded slowly. Perhaps we have been looking at the galaxy wrong all this time. We thought power came from technology, from knowledge, from numbers. But maybe the greatest power comes from simple endurance, from refusing to die, from fighting back no matter how many times you are knocked down. He sat back in his chair. Thank you, Dr. Velix. You have opened our eyes. Velix bowed slightly. As she walked off the stage, she felt something she had not expected to feel. Pride. Not pride in herself, but pride in the species she had spent weeks studying. Humans were strange. Humans were frightening. But they were also, in their own impossible way, beautiful. And the galaxy was very lucky to have them. 6 months had passed since Dr. Velix gave her presentation to the Galactic Medical Council. In that time, everything had changed. The Human Medical Exchange Program was now the largest scientific project in Coalition history. Research stations orbited Earth. Human doctors worked in hospitals on 100 different worlds. Medical knowledge that humanity had developed over thousands of years was being shared with species who had never imagined such things were possible. Vaccination. Protocols were being adapted for non-human biology. It was difficult work. Most species could not handle the direct approach that humans used. Their immune systems were too weak, too undeveloped. But scientists were finding ways to trigger similar responses using modified techniques. The first successful trials had begun on Pelian volunteers. Early results were promising. The research station called Unity hung in orbit above Earth, spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. It was a massive structure, built by dozens of species working together. Inside, thousands of researchers studied everything from human blood cells to Earth's microbial life. Outside, shuttles came and went constantly, carrying supplies, scientists, and visitors from across the galaxy. Sergeant Ethan Park stood on the observation deck, watching a Pelian shuttle approach the docking bay. He had been promoted twice since the Orion Station crisis. Now he served as a liaison between human forces and the Coalition research teams. It was a good job. Interesting. Sometimes confusing, but mostly good. Captain Grace, Kim, walked up beside him. She had been promoted too. She now led the entire human contingent on Unity Station. Weird, isn't it? Ethan said, not taking his eyes off the shuttle. What's weird? All of this. He gestured at the station around them. 6 months ago, we were just another new species. Nobody paid much attention to us. Now, we're celebrities. Everyone wants to study us. Everyone wants to understand how our bodies work. Grace smiled. Some people would enjoy being the center of attention. Yeah, well, I'm not some people. Ethan shook his head. They look at us like we're superheroes or something. Like we chose to be this way. But we didn't choose anything. We're just people. We're just people. We get sick. We get tired. We die like everyone else. We just do it a little more slowly. Grace was quiet for a moment. You know what Sergeant Wright told me once? She said humans aren't survivors because we're special. We're survivors because we're stubborn. We don't know when to quit. Ethan laughed. That sounds like Hannah. The shuttle docked successfully. Through the observation window, they could see the doors opening. A group of young aliens stepped out, looking around with wide, nervous eyes. They were new students, here to learn about human medicine. Speaking of stubborn, Grace said, Dr. Velix is supposed to meet them. Where is she? Probably still in the lab. She never stops working. They found Dr. Velix in Research Lab 7, surrounded by holographic displays and data tablets. She looked different from 6 months ago. Healthier, happier. The fear that had filled her eyes when she first discovered human biology had been replaced by curiosity and excitement. Ah, Captain Kim, Sergeant Park. Velix turned to greet them. I lost track of time. Are the new students here already? Just arrived, Grace said. You should go meet them. They're probably terrified. Velix nodded and began gathering her things. They should be terrified. In a good way. They're about to learn things that will change how they think about medicine forever. Ethan watched her rush out of the lab. She's come a long way. We all have. Grace walked over to one of the displays. It showed a comparison between human and Pelian immune systems. Do you ever think about how strange all of this is? A few months ago, nobody knew anything about human biology. Now we're teaching the whole galaxy. I try not to think about it too much. It makes my head hurt. They left the lab and made their way to the main hall, where Velix was already speaking to the new students. The young aliens listened with wide eyes as she explained what they would learn during their time on the station. The human immune system, Velix was saying, is unlike anything else in the known galaxy. Over the next year, you will study its components in detail. You will learn about macrophages and lymphocytes. You will understand how antibodies work. You will see how the human body fights disease from the inside out. A young alien raised a tentacle. Dr. Velix, is it true that humans can survive diseases that would kill any of us? Not all diseases, Velix replied. Humans are still vulnerable to many things. But yes, they can survive infections that would be fatal to most other species. And more importantly, they can become immune to diseases after surviving them once. This is what we call adaptive immunity. Another student spoke up. Why did humans develop this ability? Why don't other species have it? Velix smiled. It was the same question she had asked herself many times. Because of Earth, the human homeworld is one of the most dangerous places in the galaxy. It is filled with bacteria, viruses, parasites, and predators. Everything on Earth is trying to eat something else. Humans evolved in this environment. They had to become strong or they would have died. She gestured toward Ethan and Grace, who were watching from the back of the room. These two humans survived a plague that killed 94% of the people it infected. They walked through contaminated areas without protection. They touched infected patients with bare hands. And they did not get sick. Not because they are special, but because their ancestors spent millions of years developing defenses against exactly these kinds of threats. The students turned to look at the humans. Ethan felt uncomfortable under their gaze. He still was not used to being treated like some kind of biological miracle dot after the orientation ended. Velix found Ethan and Grace in the cafeteria. She sat down at their table with a tired sigh. Long day? Grace asked. Every day is long on this station. But good long. Productive long. Velix took a sip of water. I wanted to thank you both again. For everything. You don't need to keep thanking us, Ethan said. We were just doing our jobs. No, you were doing more than your jobs. During the plague, you could have protected yourselves. You could have let the rest of us die. But you chose to help. You chose to risk everything for people who were not even your own species. Velix looked at them with all four of her eyes. That is not just doing a job. That is being heroes. Grace shook her head. We're not heroes. We're just people who happen to be immune to a disease. That is exactly what makes you heroes. Velix leaned forward. You had power that the rest of us did not have. You could have used that power selfishly. Instead, you used it to save lives. That is the definition of heroism. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the cafeteria windows, they could see Earth rotating slowly below them. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling across the surface. A beautiful world that had spent billions of years trying to kill everything on it. You know what I've learned from studying humans? Velix said quietly. I've learned that strength is not about being unbreakable. It's about getting back up after you break. Humans break all the time. You get sick. You get hurt. You lose people you love. But you always get back up. You always keep fighting. She looked out at Earth. Your planet tried to destroy you for millions of years. Diseases, disasters, predators, everything. But you never gave up. You never stopped fighting. And now here you are, spreading across the galaxy, teaching other species how to survive the way you do. Ethan followed her gaze. He had grown up on that planet. He had never thought of it as dangerous. It was just home. But Velix was right. Earth was a brutal world, and humanity had clawed its way to dominance through pure stubbornness. "I guess we're just too dumb to know when we're beaten," he said with a small smile. Velix laughed. It was a strange sound, different from human laughter, but warm and genuine. "Perhaps that is your greatest strength. You do not know when to stop. You do not understand the word impossible. So you keep going until you succeed." Grace stood up and stretched. "Well, this has been a nice philosophical chat, but I have reports to file. Some of us have actual work to do." She walked away, leaving Ethan alone with Velix. The alien doctor continued staring at Earth. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said, "Of course. When you first discovered what our immune systems could do, you were terrified. I could see it in your eyes. You looked at us like we were monsters." Ethan paused. "Do you still feel that way?" Velix was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "When I first learned about humans, I was afraid. You were so different from everything I knew. Your bodies were designed for war. You carried armies inside you. I thought you might be dangerous." She turned to look at him. "But then I watched you during the plague. I saw Sergeant Wright carrying supplies through death zones. I saw Private Cho handling bodies with dignity and respect. I saw Specialist Tran comforting dying Pelians. I saw you cooking meals for people who could not feed themselves." Her four eyes met his two. "And I realized that I had been looking at you wrong. Your bodies may be designed for war, but your hearts are designed for kindness. You have the power to walk through plagues untouched, but you use that power to save others instead of yourselves." She reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, so different from human skin. "I am not afraid of humans anymore, Sergeant Park.